Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Roberto Corona. I am an Italian anthroposopher and astrologer, and in this video we're going to talk about the second and last eclipse of the year, the annular solar eclipse in Libra taking place on October 2nd. An eclipse that, as we will see, brings about strong, dark, feminine forces, since not only it's going to take place in Libra, which is of course Venus's domicile, but it will take place in close conjunction with Lilith, the black moon, the lunar apogee. Now, as you can see from this picture depicting Archangel Michael with the sword and the scales, we officially enter the autumn season with this eclipse. A challenging ingress, I would say, since the Festival of Michael, which falls on September 29, is placed right in between the two eclipses. Here's a list of the eclipses of the year. As you can see, we have reached the last eclipse of 2024, and this eclipse follows the last lunar eclipse of September 18, and I'm going to leave you the link in the description down below if you want to check out that video, which I highly recommend because we've talked about Comet Tsuchinshan Atlas and its contribution, so you don't want to miss that. Now in this video, we will delve deep into the next annular solar eclipse of October 2nd, which is going to take place again at 10 degrees 03 Libra. Now let's talk first about the last changes in the sky. On October 22nd, we're going to have the autumn equinox, of course, which is by definition the sun entering the zodiac sign of Libra. The following day, on September 23rd, Venus enters Scorpio. Now, this is important because Venus is the ruler of the eclipse, and in Scorpio, she's not doing well. On September 26th, Mercury also enters Libra, and we find Mercury here in conjunction with the event. Again, September 29 is the festival of Archangel Michael, and this, guys, is important because it is the festival of courage, the festival of light defeating darkness. So it is important to remember that since we're going to need it. Now, this is, of course, a solar eclipse, and first of all, this means that this is a basically new moon. It is when the sun, the moon, and the earth are aligned in that order, and this new moon is going to create a cone of shadow because, as we know, the moon overshadows the sun. Now, this is going to trigger sudden and unpredictable events, and this is because this cone of shadow is going to create a very, I wouldn't say rare phenomenon, but basically it happens roughly twice a year, and this is a moment when harmful entities and astral forces that are present on our planet can eventually be expelled out in the cosmos, and this phenomenon is basically the opposite that we saw when we have a lunar eclipse taking place. Well, in that case, we have astral forces of an evil nature penetrating down in the Earth atmosphere, but this time with a solar eclipse, we have them expelled out in the cosmos. Now, in general, this means that this eclipse is better than the last one, right? However, we should not underestimate the fact that these forces rise and gather before being thrown out. And so for this reason, we have this sudden and unpredictable events taking place because of this rush of nasty astral energy. Now, eclipses are different according also to the lunar node, which is involved. And as you can see, this moon is located in close conjunction to the south lunar node, the so-called tail of the dragon. Now, the tail of the dragon comes with a poisonous sting, and traditionally, the south node is considered to be a little Saturn, meaning that it brings a destructive quality with it, or if you like, tend to bring major endings rather than major beginnings. That is usually the signification connected to the north node. So let's take a look at the chart. Technically speaking, this eclipse is taking place at 10 degrees Libra and 3 minutes in the starry image of the Virgin. You can see it here. This is the Virgin. It's an upside down woman figure. And the moon, this is very interesting, sun and moon are aligned with two fixed stars of this constellation. And these are the star Vindemiatrix, the grape harvester, also known as the widow star. And of course, this is a malefic star of the nature of Saturn and Mercury. And the star Purima, a benefic star of the nature of Venus and again, Mercury. So what's interesting here is that both stars have the nature of Mercury. And this is important because, as you can see, Mercury itself is in close conjunction with the eclipse. So we have the eclipse aligned with two stars that comes with the nature of Mercury, and Mercury is there as well. Now, on top of that, the eclipse, unfortunately, is taking place right on Lilith, the black moon, the lunar apogee. So here's Lilith. This is Lilith's symbol. And I want to say right away that I give Lilith a more Kabbalistic interpretation. Now, what I mean by that is that I consider this point as purely malefic. So I had to point that out because many astrologers see in Lilith a source of redemption for the feminine, also giving her positive significations, which I personally I'm not inclined to do. And of course, I invite you to delve deeper into that and make up your own mind about it. But in my opinion, Lilith is the mother of demons, and it is a malefic point. Now, moving on, being in Libra, the eclipse is ruled by Venus. And as we said, Venus is not doing great. She's in Scorpio, so she's debilitated because this is the sign of her exile. Now, concerning the aspects, first of all, as you can see, we have this square connecting Mars and the eclipse. So this is not good. Mars, as you know, in Cancer is debilitated. And of course, being the god of war, it is going to create a lot of emotional turbulence. And also, Venus, on the other hand, is making this trine with both the malefics. So on the one hand, Mars, and on the other, Saturn. So definitely the water element is involved because this is a grand trine of water. So let's now talk about the meanings of the chart. As always, I start from the physical signification. And from this standpoint, we are faced with sudden events of a destructive nature. This is because, again, it is a solar eclipse, a new moon. We have things getting started, set to motion. So we're going to have like external events happening. And they're going to involve the south node, which has a destructive nature, right? In which area of life are they going to happen? In the areas represented, of course, by the sign of Libra. So this means justice, politics, the legal and formal dimensions, paperwork in general, really anything representing agreements between human beings. Agreements that unfortunately have this tendency here of being broken, betrayed, since Mercury is involved. And Mercury here is involved in two ways, both by body, as we say traditionally. So basically Mercury is in conjunction with the eclipse, and because of the star Vindemiatrix that comes with the nature of Saturn, yes, but also Mercury. So by body and by the nature of the stars involved. So why this Mercury is bad? Because Mercury takes on a shadow side here because of the eclipse, because of Lilith, and tend to express himself in a more, cunning, because Mercury is the trickster planet. And this means that, this Mercury may lead us towards being fake or to scams. It can also create, situations of theft or lies and so on. And so this Mercury is definitely a shadow version of the messenger of the gods because of Lilith, of course, and the eclipse. Lilith in particular is the mother of demons. And this means that Lilith tends to generate all these mercurial shadows. So it is literally her giving birth to these mercurial shadow, because Lilith is a vampire, meaning that she is basically taking away from us human beings creative and generative forces to turn them to to this creation of shadows. And on top of that, Venus, ruler of the eclipse, is in Scorpio. So this means that, the signification of doing things in secret or behind other people's back is definitely there. So this is important because we have mercurial shadows of a trickster, cunning nature, and Venus basically in the shadows. So this is not good. On top of that, this can also involve large banking and financial operations because, Scorpio represents hidden and occult powers. And from a physical perspective, large banking and financial groups are definitely represented by Scorpio. So this can also involve, shady operations like by these large financial groups. So we also want to keep an eye on Mars, which is debilitated in Cancer. So Mars is here, is creating this square with Sun, Moon, and Mercury. And Mars can lead us to emotional conflicts because, of course, he is the god of war. So Mars is creating an extra tension towards the eclipse. Now, in general, we can definitely say that the feminine of the chart is particularly wounded, and this could unfortunately also increase violence and injustice towards women and women's rights. From the soul's perspective, this eclipse brings about challenges in both relationships and friendships, which are both forms of love represented by Venus. Here, the symbolism of poison emerges quite clearly, since first of all, Venus is debilitated in Scorpio, hence the poison, right? And secondly, the south node, the dragon's tail, has a poisonous sting too. So we can easily add Lilith to the equation, but this means that these sudden events may easily involve toxic, poisonous dynamics. And of course, we're talking here about toxic relationships, but also toxic friendships. So in this regard, we also want to remember that Mercury is making a square with Mars. So we also want to be extra careful about what we say, how we say it, being Mars the god of war and Mercury the god of communication. Now, Venus is also making this great trine of water that we mentioned, but unfortunately, Venus is doing that with two malefics, and one of them, Mars, is debilitated, meaning that is tends to be more evil, right? So Mars in Cancer represents conflicts in the sphere of our affections, and Saturn in Pisces tends to dispel our delusions and to cut off dead branches, so to speak. So basically, what we have here, at least in the worst case scenario, is betrayals, people cheating on us, followed by quote-unquote loss of love, which is one of the significations of the star Vindemiatrix, which is the widow star. And this doesn't need to be, a literal loss, but it could definitely concern the symbolic death of our relationship. So you want to keep that in mind and pay attention to what you say and how you say it, right? Now, from a spiritual perspective, the event is taking place in the starry image of the Virgin, which is here. And in astrosophy, the Virgin represents the relationship of humanity with the Father Principle, being the Father Principle represented by the opposite constellation of Pisces. Now, this means that we are called to embrace and take responsibility of part of the karma of humanity, putting ourselves at service of others. This is what the Virgin does, to process this karma, bringing it to completion in the best way possible. Now, what's interesting about using the starry images in general is that we can literally see where the planets are placed in the figure. So we want to use the image of the Virgin here, and we can see that most of the planets, most of these points, the lunar node and Lilith as well, they are placed on the Virgin's throat. Now, this means that there's a reference here both to communication, as we have already seen, talking about Mercury, but also to the throat chakra. Now, the throat chakra in particular is that subtle organ that allows us to process and purify our passions, our desires. And passions in particular is a signification highlighted quite clearly both by Lilith and by Venus in Scorpio, right? And in particular, it was Gautama Buddha to indicate the Eightfold Path as a way to develop this chakra and to overcome the thirst for life, which ultimately leads to suffering. So this is a very important spiritual indication that we can see here, pointed out by the planets on the throat of the Virgin. Now, on top of that, the eclipse also takes place in conjunction with a benefic star. So we not only have Vindemiatrix, which is an evil star, but we also have Porrima, and the name comes from one of the Kameni, which were deities of springs linked to prophecy. So we have a star of prophecy here. Now, this means that we are called to process this karma, also trying to predict situations with a certain foresight, and keeping passions at bay, especially paying attention to what we say, right? Of course, again, the impulse of the Festival of Michael is going to help us in this regard. Now, as always, we can use astrocartography here to understand where in the world the eclipse is going to be stronger. Here you can see the lines where the eclipse is going to take place on one of the four angles. So we have in red the ascendant line. Here we have in yellow the descendant line. In green we have the midheaven line, and in blue we have the IC line. So as you can see, the ascendant-descendant axis basically falls into the oceans. This is good, right? Because this means that we are not going to have anywhere in the world, basically, the eclipse right on the ascendant or descendant, right? However, the MC-IC axis that you can see here in green and blue falls respectively across the United States and Canada and India. Fortunately, none of these axes seem to be involved in the actual path of the eclipse. And this is important because what we want to do is comparing this chart with the actual path of the eclipse to see where the event will be most powerful. And so, as you can see here, we're not going to have any axes involved in the actual path of the eclipse. This is a picture taken from timeanddate.com, and as you can see, the eclipse path mainly involves South America, where the eclipse does not occur in any of the angles. And this is going to be at least an important, mitigation overall of the phenomenon. As always, thanks for watching. If you want to support my work, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell not to miss out on future astrological insights. I am Roberto Corona. See you in the next video.